In today's show, we're talking returns. Damian Lillard returns to Portland for the second time with the Milwaukee Bucks, and we take stock of the return from the Dame trade some 18 months later. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. As Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're talking returns. Damian Lillard returns to the Moda Center for the second time as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks on Tuesday evening. Plus, we take stock of the Blazers' trade return. Where do we stand 18 months after Damian Lillard requested a trade out of Portland? What does the return on the Damian Lillard trade look like? We'll talk about that in today's show. Plus, Shaedon Sharpe's not going to be in the dunk contest, and that sucks. But that's what are you going to do? The dunk contest is broken. They had a chance to add him to the game his rookie season, and the NBA screwed it up. And maybe, unfortunately, we'll never get him in there. Let's talk Dame's return again. When he came back last year, it was this like emotional, chaotic event, right? He flew in early. He went to an Adidas court naming ceremony, and he had a birthday party for his younger twins, who I believe were turning 3 at the time. They held in the Moda Center. This is kind of like stupid media stuff, but like they had to use a special section of the the behind the scenes guts of the arena that they've only ever used for the freaking Western Conference Finals in my 10 years around the team, just to create enough space for Damian Lillard to host a pregame press conference. He held a party after the game and at one of the bars in the guts of the arena for friends and family to come celebrate his return. It was a whole pomp and circumstance. Now, Dame's people are going to be in the arena. Shoot, I've seen Houston Lillard, his older brother, in the arena a handful of times this season already. It's got good seats, believe it or not. But it's not going to be the same thing. For one, the Bucks played in Utah tonight, and Damian Lillard played 41 freaking minutes in a 15-point win over the Utah Jazz. Dame had a game. Him and Giannis combined for 70. Each of them had 35. Dame had 35 points, 5 boards, and 8 assists in 41 minutes in a 15-point win at the Jazz. 41 minutes the first night of a back-to-back. Not great, but I would be very surprised if Dame does not play in tonight's game. You're listening to Tuesday, January 28th episode. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. Giannis Antetokounmpo was on the injury report prior to this game, so we'll see what his deal is on Tuesday. And Chris Middleton, I would be pretty surprised. I don't think he plays back-to-back, so we will not see good old Chris Middleton. But we'll see Dame back in the building. And I won't, last year was the only time I wrote anything all year long. I wrote a little essay about Damian Lillard returning to Portland and what kind of meant and felt like and all of those things. It was a big, if it gets me back on the keyboard, smashing letters and not just yelling into a microphone, it's a major event, right? Like it's not that I am important, but just in terms of my personal reaction, it will still be meaningful. It's always weird, but is not the same level. You only get one first trip back. This will be still tons of cheers and admiration, but I imagine they're not going to play a third tribute video a year later. Instead, it'll just be, one of Portland's favorites back in the city trying to beat the basketball team. And part of the team he's trying to beat are a bunch of dudes that were part of the Damian Lillard trade. I kind of want to take stock of the Dame trade. In July of 2023, he asks out. July 1st, 2023, he asks out. We're now 18 months since the trade request. It wasn't traded until August, of course, but it became clear that it was over in July, despite some sort of silly reporting at the end that's like, Dame wants to come back. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. I bet he does. It's not, we haven't, the Blazers roster, we haven't seen a full rollover from the Damian Lillard era, and that's kind of part of it. But we have seen a return on the Dame trade that are like big parts of this group. Whether they're the part of like the next great Blazer team is certainly a question that is still out there, but there are some very successful parts and some solid return on that trade. Let's talk about what it is. The first part of it brought the Blazers DeAndre Ayton and Toumani Camara. Ayton is overpaid and totally fine to sometimes not very good at all. But the Blazers took a risk on him as a change of scenery would unlock some of the skill that he possesses, and it just hasn't for him. But that was the risk they took. The central figure in the Damian Lillard trade is indeed DeAndre Ayton. At least it was at the time. There was a little known draft pick, second round draft pick, a 52nd pick in that draft that also came over from Phoenix. Toumani Camara turns out to probably be the prize part of the Damian Lillard trade. In fact, in hindsight, the centerpiece of it, a really useful, multi-positional defender. He can play, pretty much any of the 2, 3, 4 positions. He can guard point guards. He's improved as an offensive player this season. He hit 5 threes against Oklahoma City to raise his season shooting average from 33 to 35% from 3. If you're on relatively low volume, a 5 for 5 shooting night really helps. Now he went from kind of a bad 3-point shooter to slightly below average at like 35.5. But Toumani is like a really solid role player, the type of role player that would help any team, and the Blazers landing him in the first leg of the Damian Lillard trade is valuable. There is real value there. That was a hit for them. They're fined. I would say of their fines, of the Joe Cronin era, there is no doubt in my mind that Toumani Camara is the most successful thing you can point to say that Joe can say, hey, this is the type of scouting that we're capable of. The second leg of the trade is after the Blazers acquired Jrue Holiday. They then flipped him without appearing on the team to the Boston Celtics. Worked out pretty well for the Celtics. They were able to win a championship. Jrue Holiday's a champ. He's extremely good. Jrue Holiday's maybe he's just not healthy this year. He's not been nearly as good when I've watched him this season for the Celtics. But winning a championship as a really key role player, valuable for the Celtics. On the back end, the Blazers end up with Rob Williams and Malcolm Brogdon. More on Brogdon in a moment. Rob, missed all of last season, played 6 games. Still is a limited minutes is the words I'm trying to say. It's after 10 p.m. I'm recording too late at night. I don't have my words. Rob Williams in limited minutes is a very, very productive center. For my money, he's the Blazers' best big man, but can you be the best big man on the roster if you can only play about 26 minutes a night? You don't play back-to-backs. He's had some other injury things with an ankle, with a concussion. Availability is a pretty major ability, and Rob hasn't always had that. But when he plays, he's good, and the Blazers are reportedly really into keeping him around, which I find bizarre. But he's a good basketball player and a cool dude. So if you're just rooting for cool dudes who are good at basketball to be on the team, Rob Williams does seem to check both of those boxes, which as a fan can be pretty enjoyable. Then we get to what I think is sort of transitive property trades. I'm not sure I really believe in this. I'm going to talk about it because I think it's worth talking about here, but I'm not sure I really believe in this. Malcolm Brogdon played a season in Portland, missed a bunch of time and, was not dealt at the trade deadline, didn't play a single minute for the Blazers after the trade deadline, and then was shipped with 2 firsts, both of which were acquired in the Damian Lillard trade, and some second-round picks that are separate, but with 2 firsts that were acquired in the Damian Lillard trade from Golden State, it's hard to say exactly what deal it will be, but the middle of the Blazers 2029 first, which is likely to be, just based on how percentages work, either Boston or Milwaukee, which are the Blazers got those picks in the various Damian Lillard trades. So 2 picks they directly got from the Dame trade, and Malcolm Brogdon directly part of the Jrue Holiday, the second leg of the Dame trade, in exchange for Deni Avdija. I think that's a little transitive property. I'm not sure I totally buy it as as part of the Dame trade, but I've seen people lump it in with the return, and I'm okay with your logic of that. I'm not going to like fight you, but that's not how I would do it. I think those are separate, in my money, separate deals to be judged separately. But if you look at it as like the overall haul of the Damian Lillard trade, Deni Avdija has been pretty good. I think he's been the Blazers' best player this season. The fact that Deni Avdija has been the Blazers' best player probably speaks to the overall talent on the Blazers roster more than anything else. But Deni has been good. Like, he's been good. He's a versatile player on both sides of the floor. He overcame a rocky first month of the season to just be like pretty darn effective, and I think he has continued to show his value on the court recently when he's just been darn solid. And the Blazers are giving him the ball more, which I think was always the vision with when Deni was acquired, is like giving him the ball more and let him be a facilitator, playmaker, and all of those things. So all told, you end up with DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, Rob Williams, Deni Avdija, a 2029 first-round pick, and then some swaps from Milwaukee. So the haul of the trade only ends up with the Blazers. Now, if you do believe in the transitive property of the Deni Avdija part, they only end up with like one extra first, because the Milwaukee swaps might end up being valuable. We'll see kind of where the Blazers are and where Milwaukee are. Swaps, it's just, they're not extra picks. They're just an opportunity to get a slightly better pick, or sometimes a lot better pick if things break your way. But often they don't break your way. It just, things stay the way they are, and it's like, we're not even going to exercise the swap. But you get one extra pick in 2029. You get some swaps that could be valuable. Toumani is a really useful role player going forward. Deni Avdija is also that. Rob Williams is hard to know, but when he plays, good. And DeAndre Ayton is DeAndre Ayton. I think all told, this is a pretty good haul for a player of Dame's age and price tag. I think the Blazers did pretty well here. I didn't love the Deni Avdija trade at the time. I still think I think Deni Avdija is good. I still think it's a really weird trade for the Blazers to make, because I think sending out 2 firsts in the position they're in is weird. But I fully admit that Deni Avdija has been good for them. So it's like, even if I think it's like a weird process, I understand what the results were. I am able to see multiple things at the same time. That's one of the values of thinking about this basketball team, a cajillion minutes every single week. But I think the next steps for the Dame haul, if you're like thinking about like how do they build out of the Damian Lillard era, is trading some players that are on the team, is trading is trading Rob Williams, is trading DeAndre Ayton, is trading some of the guys who are, the last parts of the Damian Lillard era of Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant. And the Blazers, quite frankly, haven't, in kind of somewhat puzzling decision-making, they just haven't traded some of those guys, any of those guys. The only guy they traded was Malcolm Brogdon, and he had 2 first-round picks attached to him. It's been a little bit odd how slowly that they have moved out of this era. I think some people are probably have more patience than I do. I've been banging the drum for them to do this since June. Some of you have joined the drum circle with me. Others believe in the pragmatic patience and that it will all pay off. And guess what? We'll get to find out soon, because the trade deadline is next week. But as the Blazers look to shift out of this Damian Lillard era, like truly fully out of it, into a team comprised of guys who basically never played a single minute with him, I guess Shaedon Sharpe, Matisse Thybulle, but Jabari, but like handful of guys who played very sparingly with him, and none of them on like the like major meaningful roles, and certainly none in like big competitive games like Anthony Simons occasionally did. There are some hurdles along the way for the Blazers to make those deals. Let's talk about those hurdles in light of a couple rankings of trade value that came from some national writers. I'll share those with you in the second segment. We're talking names that are at the end of lists that you don't necessarily want to be on. Join me in that second segment, won't you? First, though, let's talk FanDuel, because it's Super Bowl 59. The big game, one game, 2 teams that you're familiar with, endless possibilities, Chiefs, Birds, and there's no better time than to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether you're predicting the first touchdown, calling for the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can even adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel that thrill from kickoff to final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate, so you can find all types of fun wagers if you're that type of person. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets on the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the proverbial cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win that $5 bet, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right. So the Dame Haul looks pretty good. Looks good. Some really interesting parts. I mentioned yesterday that Tumani and Deni Avdija are clearly, could be part of the next great Blazer team. Hard to project out when the next, 55 win, really, really good team is going to come down the line, because that seems to me fairly distant in the future, and NBA rosters change pretty quickly. But if you told me Deni and Tumani were the starters on a Blazers team that won 51 games, I'd be like, yeah, I believe it. They're pretty good. But I am not comfortable saying these guys are definitely going to be on the next team that makes the playoffs, because predicting NBA roster stuff is tough. But one of the sort of shadows, in my opinion, hanging over the sort of the post-Dame era is that the Blazers have been really slow to make moves. I have probably been more vocally impatient than many other media members in the market. Perhaps that's just my style, or perhaps I was right all along. No, I'm just kidding with that. But I do think my general impatience, which dates back to February last year, when I was saying the Blazers should try to trade Anthony Simons, or at least explore it really seriously, and then in June I said they have to try to explore trading the vets, and it seems like they maybe got a little bit of a ways down the road with Jeremy Grant, but then they didn't, and there was some reporting that they wanted 2 first-round picks for him, and if you recall on this podcast, my response was, good luck. Well, according to a couple people who write for national outlets, the Blazers may have some trouble trading players as we approach the deadline. I think in general, there's some skepticism over whether there's movement at all. I think a lot of folks are waiting on the Jimmy Butler mess to kind of be a domino that falls one way or another, either doesn't fall and other moves happen, or is part of this big trade that makes, a lot of teams can get involved with one way or another, and then that kind of opens the floodgates, etc. Jimmy Butler, of course, on Monday, was suspended indefinitely by the Heat. Pretty safe bet he never plays a game in Miami ever again. Life comes at you at medium speed. Look out for it. So, speaking of trade value, Jimmy Butler, bizarre trade value, but the Blazers have some guys with limited trade value, and that's just the truth of it. And part of this is that the linear passage of time has not created a better market for some Blazers vets they've held on to, and also some of these dudes just never had much value to begin with. Stephen Noe over at the Sporting News ranked his 10 worst contracts in the NBA heading into the deadline, and the 2 Blazers appeared on the list. You don't want to have 20% of the worst contracts in the league. That's no good. At number 9, DeAndre Ayton came in. You kind of know the deal. He signed a max contract, not the big one, but there are 3 types of max deals. I don't think anyone talks about this, but maybe we should specify what they are. 25, 30, and 35%. Ayton signed the 25% max offer sheet with the Pacers. The Suns matched it reluctantly. They didn't want to give him the money, but they didn't want to lose him for nothing. Then they had eventually traded him, even though they did make a run to the finals, and he was pretty damn useful in that 2021 finals run. DA comes in at number 9. He's just overpaid for what he is. He's like a slightly below average starting center in the league. He has obvious skills, but he has some obvious shortcomings, some of which are that he always isn't engaged, and he's paid $35 million, and the league just doesn't value centers at that type of money anymore. It is what that's the truth of it. Certainly there are max centers in the league. There's some guys really earn it, but it is a position that is not typically valued the way it was, say, in the 90s, the golden age of Hall of Fame centers, very briefly. But the second coming of David Robinson, he is not. He's just overpaid, and it's going to be hard to move him. And we've talked about it a bunch on the show. I won't reiterate it, but I can't imagine DeAndre Ayton gets traded this trade deadline, because how could they? I think there is a world in which DeAndre Ayton's $35 million expiring contract is valuable this time next year, but we're talking a full year from now. Even then, we'll have to see the landscape of the NBA to make sure that's could be true. But I think that's the world in which DA is a more valuable trade piece. He might just be more valuable. The Blazers letting him walk and having a salary slot open. We'll see what their roster looks like if that actually gets them to a place they want to go. Number 7 on Stephen Noe of the Sporting News. Did I even say it was Stephen Noe of the Sporting News? I apologize. Stephen Noe of the Sporting News. Used to write for The Athletic, cover the Bulls. I believe still based in Chicago. Stevens does a really good job covering the league. Stephen's second Blazer name on the list of the 10 worst contracts. Number 7 is Jeremy Grant. I will say this. When Jeremy Grant signed his contract, you can go back and check the tapes, baby. I didn't think the money was that bad. The years is what I was talking about a bunch on the show. It's just a lot of Jeremy Grant. So the idea that he could be a trade chip is like the annual salary didn't seem that bad, but the years, it's a lot of Jeremy Grant. 5 years is a lot of Jeremy Grant. That player option is a lot of Jeremy. Just like do teams want to trade for 4 years of Jeremy Grant, 3 years of Jeremy Grant? That's like it always seemed like just a long deal. And then this year his production just dropped off. He just can't make twos anymore. He's shooting under 45% at the rim this season. He's shooting 38% on twos overall. Like, he just can't score. His three-point shooting has been fine, but he just can't score inside the arc. And that's a big problem. For vets like Jeremy Grant, I personally don't believe that the trade value can go up that much, because it's like he's been in the league 10 years. You kind of know what he is. It can go up a little bit. If he was playing well, like, the arrow can go up. The arrow rises slower than it drops. It's like when a dude starts to really struggle, it's like, no thanks, right? If a guy is really playing well, people say, well, this might just be a hot streak, but they can't, it's hard to deny a guy who's playing really well. Like I said, I think the arrow goes up slower than it comes back down. And then obviously once it comes back down, you're still affected by the arrow going up slowly. Those are 2 names on the top 10 list. Let's talk about a couple others. Sam Vecini over at The Athletic has 4 Blazer names ranked in his top 40 tradable. It's trade board. His trade value board. It's 40 names. Number 13, the first name for the Blazers on the list is Rob Williams. Rob seems like the most likely player to get traded, although there has been some reporting that the Blazers are somewhat reluctant to trade him. That's fine. I guess, in my opinion, it's not fine, actually. I get the logic. Rob Williams is helpful. Rob Williams is a low-minute guy who would be comfortable playing low-minute role. If you want to move Donovan Clingan into the starting center spot eventually, you can say, Rob, you play behind him. You're the backup, but you can play and you can close games as needed and all those things. And he's like a cool dude. He has a good attitude. He's funny. Like, I can see why you'd want him around. But banking on Rob Williams to be a long-term solution for a team that is as far away from like really competing as the Blazers are seems silly. They should trade him for value if they can get him. It's unlikely to me that he becomes more valuable. And the longer you wait, I think the longer you wait, the road gets narrower. At 16, he has Sam Vecini of The Athletic has Anthony Simons on his top 40 NBA trade board. Simons, I think, has a narrow window just because of what he is. Like, he's a combo guard who doesn't defend. And that archetype isn't super valuable, but he can score, and he can score off the bounce, and teams that need offense could probably figure out a way to use him, although I think the list of teams is relatively short because, it's like the Magic could use him for sure. If the Spurs were in a different position, I could see a world in which they were like, yeah, we could use a little more offense off the bench. Like we could use like a little more something, a little more juice off the bench, but they're like not quite there, and they're not hitting the gas yet in terms of competing around Victor Wembanyama. I guess without Jaden Ivey, Anthony Simons makes some sense in Detroit, but it's not perfect. It's not a perfect fit for him, although I think that is a reasonable space, certainly for him to land. Ironically, Anthony Simons would be relatively helpful for the Bucks, although they need perimeter defense and they have great shooters, but they could use like one more dude who could score off the bounce for them, and he would help. There's 2 other names at the bottom of Sam Vecini's list. Let's talk about them in the third segment. Plus, no shade and sharp in the dunk contest. Join me there, won't ya? Still a past first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You're still listening to Locked On Blazers. Did I almost screw up that third segment intro? I almost did, but I recovered. Okay, Sam Vecini has 40 names on his list of his trade board, ranking the top 40 tradable players in the league, or like players likely to be traded, ranked top 40. Number 39 is DeAndre Ayton. Whew. Yeah, towards the bottom of the list. I mentioned it before. We won't harp on it too much. It's like I don't know that DA is tradable. I don't know the DA is tradable. As a spy contract he might be, but right now I'd be very surprised to learn that he's tradable. It would be like I would be stunned if DeAndre Ayton gets traded at the deadline. And the last name on the list is Jeremy Grant. Sam Vecini calls it one of the worst contracts, if not the worst contract in the NBA. Yikes. And I think this is sort of I don't know if this is the root of my frustration, but I think when I have in the past banged the drum for the Blazers to trade the vets and explore the trades, it's like the idea is that patience could pay off. And sometimes it does, but often being late is much worse than being a little bit too early. There's examples of being early being a problem. I remember when Sam Presti traded James Harden. That was a problem. There's a world in which you think trading Tyrese Halliburton early for Domantas Sabonis was a problem. The Kings kind of got what they wanted. I'd personally probably rather have Tyrese Halliburton, but Sabonis is probably the third best center in the league, if not better. Like he's freaking good. He's probably still 3 for me. But like, you know, there are many more examples of being a little bit late. And I think I have been saying like, hey, some of this might just be my own ignorant impatience with this. But as we sort of get here, and the CBA has made it harder to trade big contracts, and you kind of realize that the getting out of the shadow of the Damian Lillard era, because the Blazers chose to be patient, because they chose to be slow, because they have been deliberate in making these moves, and it has had some ripple effects across the roster in terms of playing time for young players, but it also just has watched the trade value of once tradable players diminish. And I think that's the challenge here. You don't want to take bad trades, which is why I won't be surprised at all if the Blazers do basically nothing or very little at the trade deadline, because there actually isn't much incentive for a team to take bad deals, right? Like you don't want to just say, whoops, we screwed up, take a bad deal. But the idea that like they'll be saved and things will get better for them, I think it's proven just to not be true. They didn't make the moves at last trade deadline. They did nothing over the summer to change the roster. You know, they traded for Denny Avdia, but they ran back 13 players and they ran back guys that were, you know, kind of in the way. I will say that I was wrong in some ways about Jeremy Grant. I thought that he wasn't really blocking anyone. And it's because I probably didn't see Toumani Camara being this just undeniably impactful. I thought like Toumani's pretty good. It'd be fine if he played a 22-minute role, but it's not. He's better than that. He's just better than that. And because you feel like he needs to play, Jeremy feels like he's in the way, then they're playing these 3 forwards because those are their best defensive players, which means that Shaedon Sharpe or Scoot Henderson are getting pinched every night. Avery Simons was clearly always in the way and all of those things. While he might have more trade value, he has a narrow window for trades. It's like, you know, the reason that he's 16th and not higher on the list is because there's just not a lot of suitors for him. But like it's like Jeremy Grant probably was tradable at one point when he was playing a lot better, and now his production has fallen off. And I feel like that's kind of some of my source of my frustration with kind of where the Blazers are, is that like they have practiced patience and it has not paid off, and it has not paid off in a way that someone as stupid as me could have predicted. Like I'm not that good at this transaction stuff. I don't see the Oracle doesn't really see it over here. But sometimes, you know, you scream into this microphone enough times about the same thing and nothing changes, and then you feel like you're still on the hamster wheel, and I kind of feel like I'm still on the hamster wheel. I'm willing to shut the hell up about it though until the trade deadline. We'll talk rumors and all that stuff as things come up, but I think the reporting mostly around the Blazers is that they're still kind of want to hold on to some vets, and there isn't a lot of interest in maybe the players that you'd more like, you know, would seem more obvious for them to move in a way that there may have been in the past. But I'll chill. I will reserve judgment, right? Like I feel the way I feel. I've been very clear about it. I don't want to play I told you so, but I do want to say like, this has been a thing that has frustrated me. And when I am wrong, like I was wrong about why holding on to Jeremy Grant was probably okay, I was dead wrong about that. It's not okay. It's been a disaster in part because Jeremy Grant has just struggled. And now they're kind of like, they're a little bit stuck. But I would love to be wrong about this. And when I am, I'll tell you that I am. Last thing as we close up here, no Shaedon Sharpe in the slam dunk contest. That stinks. The NBA announced on Monday that the field, or is reported by ESPN, I don't think the league has announced it officially, Stephon Castle from the San Antonio Spurs, Matas Buzelis from the Chicago Bulls, Andre Jackson Jr. from the Milwaukee Bucks, and back-to-back winner going for the first ever three-peat in dunk history, a non-NBA player and basically just a dude who does dunks for the team at their dunks for the league at the midseason showcase, Mac McClung of the G League. Come on. I said it before. From what I understand, there wasn't a ton of traction with Shaedon Sharpe getting into the dunk contest. I'm going to ask him when I'm at the arena tomorrow. I will ask him if he was approached by it, and I will report back here. But from what I understand, there wasn't much traction with getting him in the dunk contest. Just didn't really come up. We'll see what his general interest level is, and I will talk to him about that. But I just want to leave this here. This is the failing of the LeBron James era. This is the failing of the LeBron James era. Back in the day, dudes did dunk contests and won MVPs. LeBron's a coward, and he never did the dunk contest. I think it's the only thing he really got wrong. There was one interview with Jim Gray. He's a little bit of a drama king, but like for the most part, the one thing he got like legitimately wrong in his career is not doing the dunk contest. So stars don't do it anymore. How fun would it be to see freaking Anthony Edwards in the dunk contest? One of the great dunkers. Like how it would be. It would be awesome. How fun, I guess we got Blake Griffin very briefly, but it was like extremely commercial, and he jumped over a car and it was a bad dunk, but he was like clearly like had to win because of the agreement with Kia in the NBA. But we just haven't had stars do the dunk contest. It's a failing of the LeBron James era. He let the dunk contest down. I am much more invested in the dunk contest being good than the All-Star game. I think the All-Star game is generally unsalvageable if you look at like all All-Star events across the major team sports right now. Major League Baseball is kind of fine, but it's not great. The dunk contest you could salvage by having a little bit of pop. Stephon Castle, Matas Buzelis, Andre Jackson is not much pop. Mac McClung, great dunker, don't care about him. Don't care. Wish we could see Shea dunk. He's a great dunker. It would be fun. The NBA had a chance to invite him when it was in Toronto, his rookie season, and they did not invite him to the sophomore game. So Shea said, "Hell no, I'm not going to the All-Star game just for that. You could have invited me. I would have been there all weekend." The NBA blew it. Maybe we'll never see him. One of the great dunkers, one of the great leapers in the league. I would love to have seen it. Also, I would love to see what Shaedon Sharpe is like as a showman, because I bet he would have very little emotion, and that alone would be worth watching. That's going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow's show, we'll talk about Dame's return in Milwaukee and all that comes with Milwaukee, that is, and all that comes with it. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.